All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2020 Economic Update and Forecast presented by West, a Williston Financial Group company. My name is Justin Stutz. I'm the VP of Strategic Growth for West. First off, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get some really good insights into the state of our economy, what's going to happen to the real estate industry, what our industry experts are thinking about, how we come out of this pandemic, what it looks like on the other side. So guys, before I introduce our speaker, just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. First, be sure to turn off your microphone and your video. That'll just help everybody hear a little bit better as we get onto the presentation. Second, you'll see a chat box, Q&A box on your Zoom menu. Feel free to use that. If you have some questions as the presentation goes along, I'll be monitoring that. And then at the end of the presentation, if we have some time, I'll ask Pat some of those questions so he can get as many of those answered as we can. So, right, let's get started. So our speaker today is Patrick Stone. And Pat has a long and distinguished resume, including C officer positions with 3 public companies, and is the director of 2 Fortune 500 boards. He's been the senior executive in senior executive management positions, including 9 years as the president and COO of the nation's largest title insurance company. Currently, Pat serves as the executive chairman and founder of Williston Financial Group, as well as serving on several other boards right now. Inman News named him one of 2013's 100 most influential people in real estate. In 2015, one of the top 100 real estate doers. And in 2019, he was awarded as one of HousingWire's Vanguard recipients. And Pat's been a mentor of mine over the last 5 years. And the thing I think I appreciate about him the most is that he can make economy topics interesting to a technology guy like me. So I certainly appreciate his willingness to do this. So Pat, I'm gonna stop buttering you up and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Justin. Good morning, everybody. And I'm going to start by just saying you have my very best wishes. Please stay healthy, stay safe, take care of yourself and your family. That's the most important thing right now for everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on. I'll start off by saying there are a couple analogs to where we are right now. You hear a lot of people say we've never seen this before. We've seen some things like this before, not exactly, but two prior recessions are pertinent to what I'm going to talk about today. The first one, of course, was the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919. The analog there is that it was a massive pandemic. It killed 675,000 people in the US. As a percentage of population, that would be equivalent to 2 million people today. What is interesting about it is that the federal government never acknowledged it because we were fighting World War I and they were very concerned about showing weakness. So all the response was done by states and by cities, more specifically by cities. We are seeing somewhat the same thing happening this time where the states are actually doing the response. Very uneven, unfortunately. This just shows the different states, what they've done. Almost all states are now removing some of the shelter-in-place requirements and restrictions, and we are going back quickly to a more open economy. Or quickly, let me correct that. We're progressing towards an open economy. How quick will depend on a couple of things I'll talk about. One of the lessons learned in the Spanish flu, however, was that the degree of shelter-in-place that was enforced had a direct impact on the number of infections and the mortality rate. You look at Philadelphia, they did a very poor job. They had a parade right in the middle of the pandemic, and they had massive problems. They had great infections and high mortality. St. Louis, on the other hand, did a very strict shelter in place and had very low infections and mortality. San Francisco had a very strict shelter in place, but lifted it after 2 weeks and had a very strong resurgence of the pandemic. So there's plenty of statistical evidence about shelter in place working. How effective it is depends on how quickly it's implemented, how strictly it's enforced, and then how carefully it is released. So there are lessons to be learned there. We'll see what happens going forward with the current situation. One thing I will give the federal government credit for on this pandemic is they have put a lot of dollars on the table to try to help. And this just shows federal spending as a percentage of the economy and on 5 different major events. The New Deal, World War II, the Great Society, Vietnam War, the financial crisis, and then this pandemic. The stimulus and government interaction and the CARES Act and Federal Reserve has been massive. And candidly, I still think we need one more stimulus. I think Fed Chairman Powell agrees with that. He was talking day before yesterday about hoping we got one more stimulus. I do worry a little bit about state and local governments running out of money because their tax base is going to decline dramatically. And between you and me, many of the services that we depend on obviously come from state and local government. The state of Oregon, where I live, projects a 17.7% shortfall in revenue over the next 2 years. So they're going to have to curtail services dramatically. So we do need a little help for state and local government. I would like to see another stimulus program for the unemployed and small business. We'll see what happens out there. The other analog I think is pertinent here is the Volcker recession. And in the sense that this is pertinent is that the Volcker recession was a man-made recession in the early 80s. If you recall, we had massive inflation. We had actually what was called stagflation in the late 70s. Inflation was rampant. Paul Volcker became Fed chairman and raised rates significantly and quickly to curtail and kill inflation, and he was successful. If you recall, mortgage rates got up around 15%. There were not a lot of mortgages being taken out at 15%, but it did stop the inflation and dropped interest rates. What was really interesting, where the analog lies here, is that was a man-made recession just like this, and the rehiring of people was startlingly fast. 2.5 million people were rehired very, very quickly. You can see on this graph here that manufacturing, the retail, construction, just a real quick rehiring of people. People were actually furloughed more than terminated. So when we look at the unemployment numbers now, and as presented by the press, we tend to think people having lost their jobs. They have lost their jobs. If they're rehired, they're furloughed. And I think you will see a significant amount of rehiring in some industries, very much parallel to what happened with the Volcker recession. So government has taken action, so has the Fed. You can see here, Fed has cut rates to about 0.25%. They're going to keep them there, and I think you're going to see them keep them there for quite a long time. In fact, I think they're going to come out with a very strong statement saying that they're going to keep them there until inflation gets to 2%. They may have some other definitions that they offer, but what that means to us in the real estate business is that you're going to see low mortgage rates at least for another year, maybe longer, depending on how this goes. President and Congress, the stimulus package, you can see other things they've done here. I think we need one more, but it's been pretty progressive so far. Now, one thing I would call everybody's attention to is we're in a lot better shape now than we were during the Great Recession. And I think we naturally revert back to the pain and experience we had with the Great Recession. It took a long time to get out of the Great Recession. We're in a lot better shape now. The average FICO score, look at this, the average FICO score in the United States is 20 points higher than it was in 2009. If you break it down, the median FICO score on mortgage originations right now is about 775. The bottom quarter is a little over 700. The bottom 10% is about 660. And look at this, and you look at one of the hangovers of the Great Recession was that real estate got blamed for a lot of the problems. And it was really Wall Street's securitization of subprime debt that caused the problem. But looking at real estate back in 2007, 2008 versus today, on this chart, you can see that home equity shown in the orange line was about 14 trillion. Today, it's about 18.6 trillion. Home equity debt or debt outstanding was about 1.1 trillion. Now it's down to 510 billion. So we are just significantly different place in terms of real estate and the health of the real estate market. This chart shows that again. You can see active number of mortgages about the same. Share of homeowners with 10%, less than 10% equity was 14.5% in 2007, 6.6% today. You can see loan to value debt to income, credit score, all these things are significantly better today. I would also call your attention, if you look down the chart a ways, subprime loans, 5.1 million in 2007 and 1.9 million today. And then adjustable rate mortgages, 12.8 million in 2007 and 3.2 million today. There is no parallel in terms of the health of the real estate market right now compared to where we were when we went into Great Recession. Let's talk about the economy and the forecasts and the outlooks. Here's the initial unemployment insurance claims. We just had one more that came out at 2.4 million for last week. That just came out, so it's not on this chart. But if you add that 2.4 million to everything you see here from mid-March, that's about 38.6 million people have filed unemployment insurance claims, about 15% of the workforce, maybe a little higher than that. And that is U3. That's a measurement that we use for unemployment. And 38.6 million is a lot of people, and 15 to 17% unemployment is very, very high. If you look at U6, which also counts underemployment or people that are no longer looking for a job because they can't find one and don't think they can find one, we're at about 22% of the workforce is on the sidelines right now, or underemployed, not working as much as they want or not working at the job they want to have. So the impact here has been very, very significant for sure. And if you break it down by where it is hidden by the different ethnic groups, you can see here the spike in unemployment is hit Hispanics hardest, black and African Americans next hardest, then Asians and whites a little bit less. California, this is the unemployment rate in March. The April unemployment rate will be released tomorrow, so I can't tell you what it is, but I'll guarantee you it's higher than the 5.3% in March. If you look at the since February, about 21.4 million jobs have disappeared. This is equal to all the jobs created since the Great Recession. So it is a massive amount of people sitting on the sidelines. Breaking it down by the type of jobs lost, obviously the big one is leisure and hospitality. That's where the biggest drop has been. Some education and health services, retail trade has been impacted. And you can see it breaking down there. This shows the same thing, but basically the real area of concern here is leisure and hospitality. Virtually all leisure and hospitality stopped, and a lot of travel. This will probably, that segment probably won't come back as quick as the rest of the segments, just simply because that is a lot of social interaction. And I think people are going to be reticent to go there as quickly. But I think most other things will recover fairly fast. It is interesting to look at the breakdown of unemployment by the economic impact. By that I mean the spendable dollars of where it hits. You can see this shows unemployment by gender, by race, but look at the far right here. We have unemployment based on education, and there's a correlation there in the overall income. You can see highly educated people that make most money are the least impacted by this recession. It has not been even. Most recessions are a little bit more equal in their impact. This one has not been at all. It has basically been hourly workers and workers at low-paying jobs that have been the most impacted. Leisure and hospitality, waiters, people doing hourly income. So and it's unfortunate to have to even say this, but the positive there is that it will not impact the real estate industry as dramatically as it would if it was more evenly distributed on income. Also, another way to look at low-income households, this is where it's been the biggest impact. You can see here the share of job losses. The income replacement has been very good, at least initially. And I say we need another stimulus. We do not want people out there without the ability to buy food or to subsist. So we need another stimulus because we will run out of money on the low end, but the response so far has been very good in terms of making up for lost income. Again, the biggest impact on the bottom quintile, the bottom 20%. Unemployment shares, and this, I just had to throw this in because there's been a lot of talk. I mean, okay, forgive me here. If you're a nerd, you get involved in conversations about, are we approaching this right compared to other countries? And other countries went directly to just having companies, subsidizing companies to maintain people in an employed manner. Instead of people being unemployed and being compensated by the government while being unemployed, Other countries went about just keeping people employed. So you see a difference in the employment rate. I don't know that that really tells the story, but you get that conversation going a lot. So a lot of people are talking about the Great Depression, and this is just like the Great Depression because we've never seen unemployment rates as high as we saw during the Great Depression. Personally, I don't think it's like the Great Depression. I'll just show you this slide here. And if you look on the left side, unemployment rate during the Great Depression got way up there. Now, this slide was done about a month ago, so forgive me, it doesn't show COVID-19 unemployment rate getting up to 17% like it should. But also the forecast shows a COVID-19 unemployment rate dropping fairly quickly. The financial crisis, the Volcker recession, and the Great Depression all had more prolonged unemployment impact than this will have. On the right, we see change in global trade volume since the pre-recession peak. This is a little bit concerning because you see the Great Depression, global trade basically stopped. We had the Smoot-Hawley tariff and a few other reasons, but it really declined dramatically. You see during the Great Recession, it recovered after about a year, well, after about 20 weeks after the peak, it started going back fairly significantly. Projection here is we may see a little bit longer impact from COVID-19 on global trade. One, the pandemic is international in scope. The second thing is that we really have shut down a lot of the trade, and then we had underlying tariffs that predated the pandemic. So we need to watch that because we are a global economy, and a great deal of our economy is dependent on globalization. Looking forward, there's a kind of a trend going on right now in terms of projections and estimates. And I'll just give you an overview of this. You can see here JP Morgan, bad first quarter, really bad second quarter, improvement in the third quarter, and improvement in the fourth quarter, but really sort of a sharp turnaround. They also project that internationally. Obviously, China was 1 quarter ahead, but you can see UK, Germany, Italy, US, down first quarter, down more second quarter, big third quarter, not quite as big a fourth quarter. One thing I want to point out here, and I get real concerned about how long this lasts because there has been some real good work done that shows a correlation between how long you have a drop in income and how long it takes for spending to reemerge. You can see under 6 months in income loss and under 6 months spending, it recovers fairly quickly. You get income loss out over 6 months. The longer it goes, the longer it takes for spending to recover. And this is what we saw in the Great Recession. We are all painfully aware of how long it took to recover from the Great Recession. I mean, it was 2016, there's 2017 before we were even starting to feel like we were back to normal from 2010 or 2009. So if you have a long or prolonged period where you have a loss in income, you will have a very long recovery in spending. And obviously we don't want to see that. Goldman Sachs, this is their projections. They are down, they just revised this again. I apologize, I don't have that slide. They are at 39% drop in Q2 now as opposed to the 43% you see here. And they are showing again a big pickup in Q3, Q4, then into next year. Overall, if you look at these, all these entities and what they predict, Q1 drop, Q2 drop, and then Q3 recovery, Q4, and then the annualized amount. By and large, most economists right now are right around the 30% drop in Q2, a pickup in Q3 and Q4. But really, we're looking probably to the end of next year to get back. You're going to see a recovery, what we call a 90% economy. I doubt you're going to see any sort of mass gatherings or really a tremendous resurgence in leisure and hospitality until we have some sort of antiviral medicine or a vaccine that allows us to have more social engagement. So we will recover to about 90% of our economy, and then we will wait for that medical breakthrough in order to get back to 100%. Most people I talk to think end of 2021, we will be back to normal. We'll see. Areas hardest hit by this pandemic-induced recession, agriculture is just getting clobbered. They were having problems, as this chart shows, because of tariffs. That had impacted them tremendously. The agricultural business hadn't been making much money for the last 4 or 5 years. Right now, they're killing thousands of pigs because they can't get them to market. They're dumping milk on the ground because they can't get it to market. The stop in overseas shipment of grains is hurt. So the agricultural business is going to get hurt pretty bad by this pandemic. You can see farm sector debt was at about 415 billion in 2019. And that's probably going to go up fairly significantly. Now, a lot of agribusinesses, large corporations, most of it's in the Midwest, but that area is going to get hurt. If this goes on long enough, we may have a problem with some publicly traded companies that rely too much on debt, haven't made a profit. And I say that to people, they say, well, that's not many companies. Well, it's actually about 43% of all companies last year that are publicly traded didn't make a profit in the US. Most of them are small companies, as you see here. The Russell 2000, about a third of the Russell 2000 didn't make a profit last year. Big companies, S&P 500 companies, about 1%. So big companies are not a problem. Small companies, a lot of them don't make a profit. How long this goes may impact them. I don't think it's going to, because I don't think it'll last that long. But if it goes on for a long time, you need to watch this. This could be a real issue. One thing that we've seen here is most initial public offerings of companies, especially tech sector, a lot of them don't make a profit when they come public or when they're taken public. You can see the dot-com bubble peak, and we got back there. We got back to the point where a lot of companies are going public and becoming publicly traded, but they don't make a profit. So again, not necessarily a crisis unless this goes a long time, but just something to keep in mind. One area that is absolutely a disaster is the shale oil industry. It has never made sense. It's never been profitable. It has been funded by debt. Just give you an example, Bakken oil field in North Dakota, you need to get $70 a barrel to break even. And, really, I think a lot of the impetus behind the shale oil industry was to create independence in the U.S. from the Saudis and the Russians and OPEC. We wanted to be independent, and we funded most of the shale oil industry with debt. And it's been going on for 3 or 4 years where they haven't been making money. And candidly, this is going to probably put a stake in their heart here, because this does not make any sense. And you can see, I thought this was going to happen in 2022 when most of the oil and gas debt matured, or a lot of it matured, but it may happen a little sooner because of this pandemic. So we'll sum this up real quickly. Agriculture and shale oil, those are the two areas. They're both in the Midwest, and that's probably where the most pain is going to, long-term pain is going to be caused by this pandemic-induced recession. Excuse me. Talk a little bit about debt, because one of the things happening here is we're incurring a lot of debt to fight this pandemic. This shows household debt, basically home mortgage debt, home equity debt, auto loans, credit cards, and student loans. The two areas that have grown the most since the Great Recession, obviously auto loans and student loans. Now, if you look at it this way, it's a little bit different. This shows the debt as a percentage of disposable income. And obviously the American household is in much better shape than they were during the Great Recession. I tell people I think the American consumer is smarter than the American government or American business, because the American consumer deleveraged as a percentage of disposable income. Nobody else did, right? And you can see here that the American consumer is actually in very good shape as in debt to disposable income. Again, one area here that is a little bit concerning is auto loans. You can see delinquency rate in auto loans is up to about 12%, 30+ day delinquency rate. Real funny statistic that I like to quote is that 31% of all cars traded in for a new car actually have negative equity. That is just stunning to me. But the auto financial system is still the most aggressive part of our whole financial system, and was not regulated by the CFPB until the end of 2015. So auto loans are the one area I watch. Student loans are in abeyance right now, so that's not going to cause a problem short term, and hopefully we'll deal with that when we come out of this. Liabilities are concentrated among high income households, and this is good because the top quintile, the top 20%, has the most disposable income and the highest percentage of liabilities. So again, I think the American consumer is not going to get hit too hard by this. I got to be careful. There are a lot of people who are going to get hit hard by this. I apologize. I think that the economic impact will be mitigated by the fact that most of the debt is in high income, fairly wealthy households, as you can see by the share of total liabilities. Debt to income ratio is much lower across the board from now compared to where it was in 2008. Corporate debt is very high. I was getting concerned about this, although I will tell you that there's been just a tremendous amount of corporate debt borrowing in the last couple of months. And I'm actually in favor of this because what you're seeing here, investment grade corporate bond issuance, that's BBB bonds, and that has gone up dramatically in the last couple of months. That is good because American corporations are going to have the investment capital to re-engage economically on a very large and aggressive scale. I was talking to a friend of mine that runs a PE firm back east this morning, and he was telling me in the last 3 weeks he's bought 4 companies. And he said it had been 8 months, in the prior 8 months he bought 1 company. So you're seeing that the people that have money, the corporations that have money, capital available, is going to re-engage, and I think that will stimulate the economy and that will help us come out of this recession. The fiscal response will result in steep increase in the deficit. This is the deficit as a percentage of the economy, and you can see projecting that it'll be over 17, 18% in 2020. That's about $3.5 trillion deficit. We had a $1 trillion deficit last year, even in a booming economy. So we do have a problem with government debt, and it's going to have to be dealt with. You can see here that since 2007, we've gone from 35% federal debt to the economic output, and we're going to hit 100% this year. So it's gone up quickly and very dramatically. Is this a problem? It is a problem. It can be dealt with. It can be dealt with by balancing the budget and letting the economy grow. If we can operate going forward with a reasonably balanced federal budget and the economy grows for 10 years, then the percentage of debt to the economy goes down fairly significantly. And I really hope that happens. I'm going to tell you that it's going to become a problem for us if we don't deal with it at some point. The idea that it doesn't matter is not correct. You get enough debt to the size of your economy, you become known as Italy or Greece, and we don't want to go there. Treasury will need to borrow about $3 trillion more for the remainder of 2020. So there's a lot of debt being accumulated and needed. If I may just really quickly show you the total debt by state, local, federal, household, and business. Again, the one thing that stands out to me that if you compare this back to 2008, in 2008, household debt was by far and away the biggest component of the debt structure of institutional debt in this country. Today, actually, federal debt is the biggest component. Household debt and business debt are about even, tied for second. So Federal Reserve is being very aggressive, and I got to applaud the Federal Reserve for being as aggressive as they've been. They've kept markets liquid. They've stepped in anytime markets have tightened up, the repo market, any sort of market. They've been more than willing to step in and say, we will provide liquidity. They've done it for corporate bonds. They've done it for mortgage-backed securities. The Fed has been absolutely a godsend in this downturn. Their balance sheet's going to go through the roof, but that doesn't worry me too much because they can let debt mature. They don't have that big a problem shrinking that balance sheet. If you look here, total assets holding by the Federal Reserve, it's getting up there, and it'll probably end up somewhere around $8 trillion by the end of the year. But as the actual lending operations are about a third of where they were during the Great Recession. A 10-year note. I watched the 10-year note. I think most of you realize that the 10-year note is a real easy way or real good and consistent way to estimate where mortgage rates will be. Mortgage rates are typically 1.5% to 2% above the 10-year note. 10-year note's down. It was about 0.6, about 0.6.5 or 0.7 this morning. Talking about real estate, this shows San Bernardino, and you can see that days on market, because of the pandemic, gone up significantly from about 43 days to 67 days on market. Median list price for San Bernardino, Rancho Cucamonga, Ontario, Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, Temecula, Murrieta. And you can see here that we have seen a recovery in the median list price in some of the markets, dropped pretty hard with the pandemic, and then gone up in Temecula, San Bernardino for sure. Kind of mix in the other markets. Inventory's gone down, this is not surprising, given the market. People are a little bit more reticent to put their house on the market. Overall, San Bernardino single family, and people talking about will prices go down or prices go up. I'm going to tell you that my personal opinion is that demand for real estate is actually going to increase this year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's two components to it that are very, very clear. The desirability of owning a home has been magnified by this pandemic. If you're living in an apartment with a family right now, you want nothing more than to own a home. It's also caused people to want to move from an urban area to a suburban area, which will really impact the Inland Empire area. And I think it'll get people moving there. And then also the interest rates are so low that this is a very, very, very good time to be buying a home. How would you assess social distancing guidance and real estate transactions? And this survey was done a little bit a while ago by NAR, but I pointed out because it shows that about 60% of the people felt that they could do transactions. It's actually turning out to be more than that. And what we're having in the industry overall, all components of the industry have been able to adjust to accommodate doing transactions. A lot of things that are happening, or a lot of what's happening with realtors is that they are becoming much more adept at technological tools. One thing that West focuses on is training people on how to use different technologies. And I encourage everyone listening to this, take some time and decide if you want to learn more, because I think it will really help you, because I do think we have now a major push towards digitization of the real estate process. And a realtor that's going to be successful going forward is going to be more and more dependent on technology. So use West's people and capability to help you learn how to use technology. Pardon me, I live in an area where there's a lot of flowers right now, rhododendron, allergy season, if you will. Seasonally adjusted home buyer demand index dropped like a rock when this pandemic started. It has recovered very nicely. This is done by Redfin. You can see May 10th, it was actually up over January, February. So we had a fairly quick, and I think a surprisingly quick recovery in the demand index. Asking price growth recovered and then dropped a little bit, but still, 1% ahead year over year rolling average. Active listings continue to decline. That is really, there's different numbers in different places. So I kind of hate this slide, to be honest with you. It is really, it's really changing quickly in some places. You can see here, this shows new listings, 2019 to 2020, drops, leveled off, and doesn't appear to be, it appears to have gone down as far as it's going to go, and maybe we'll start seeing some recovery. One thing that's been amazing to me is the number of video tours as a percentage of overall tours. This was done at the end of March, but you can see about 30% of all tours were video tours. And delistings as a percentage of active listings. This is actually Los Angeles, but you can see delistings occur every year. You can see the 2019 numbers in blue, and then 2020, we had a surge in delistings, then it abated somewhat. We're running about 4% ahead of 2019 in terms of the delisting rate. And that's pretty consistent everywhere, to be honest with you. New listings, we did have a very strong drop in the Riverside and San Bernardino counties. All homes for sale, same thing. Really, I was kind of intrigued by this, to be honest with you, looking at this graph, because it shows every year you have a surge in homes for sale at the beginning of the year, and then it drops and then comes back. So I think you'll see it come back this year, but obviously the drop here is impacted by the pandemic. Sales and construction activity, new home sales, new construction. I was excited about this year. I thought we were going to get back to normal, where we actually had subdivisions being developed for starter homes. And I was really confident that we were going to see a big surge in new homes this year and new home sales. We're probably going to have to wait a year and a half. That's been kind of negated by the recession. Yearly change in new listings, that dropped, leveled off. You can see here, pending sales is starting to, still down, but the percent down is coming back. And this is for Riverside County. This is for the United States. Again, Riverside County coming back, not quite as fast as the United States, but that's because Southern California is probably locked down more than the rest of the United States. But the trend is in the right direction there. For sale inventory by Zillow, Riverside County, about 15,961. And then you can see the median price for Riverside County, about 388,000. Showtime does a nice job of showing listings, and you can see here real estate showings in California. This year's pandemic peak, we're down about 2.5%, about 14% down from last year. This is actually quite a recovery because it dropped like a rock in March and has come back dramatically since then. And the same thing nationally. Nationally, just a hair bit better than California, but exactly the same trend. And rates are low. Rates are going to stay low. We're going to see low rates for a year. We may start seeing some inflationary pressure a year out because of lack of international trade. One thing that's kept our rates down or had rates drop meaningfully since the 1980s has been globalization. We're disrupting globalization right now. And if we continue with tariffs and continue to disrupt globalization, you will see some upward pressure starting in about a year. But I don't think it's going to have any impact on real estate for a few years, even if it happens. So I am very confident that low rates and real estate activity will be very good for the next year. Concerns and outlook. One of the biggest concerns I have is we're so inundated with negative information that at some point it will sour people's attitudes about doing anything. We've already seen it to some degree, but I mean, it's I just had to throw this in it's really amazing, but it's a man-made recession. Biggest drop in housing starts, largest decline in builder sentiment, manufacturing index is down, industrial production is down, Philly Fed index, all bad news, but all bad news. It's like we turned the TV off. There is no picture. It doesn't mean that we didn't get here by an erosion of our and degradation of our economic system. We didn't get here because we had overspent. We didn't get here because the functionality of our economy was bad. We got here because we turned the TV off. So I worry a little bit about that, and I think that we got to be careful here because that's the one thing that I think will eventually impact people if it goes on too long. We need some good news, and I think we'll get good news. Going back to retail stores back category, I will show you real quickly. Clothing and accessories bad, but I think that will recover. You can see where the areas that are hit, and then the long-term impact. Now, this is simply a guess that's being done it was an article by the Wall Street Journal, and talk a little bit about how things are going to change long-term. And this is UBS predicting that nearly 100,000 stores will have to close over the next 5 years. 50% of the office supply stores, consumer electronic, and so forth and so on. A lot more dependence now on online purchasing. One area that I watch real carefully, non-bank mortgage markets and what's going on with servicing there. Just an area to be concerned because a lot of our mortgage market is non-bank, non-financial institutions. That is being propped up. The MBA is still lobbying heavily for more liquidity and more support, but I think the Fed is in line, and I don't think we'll have a problem here because everybody's aware of it. And obviously, the forbearance provisions have been significant. And will we have foreclosures in Q4? Yes, we will have some, but I don't think that I think that it won't be as meaningful as reflected by the amount of loans in forbearance. I think we'll get through this without too much pain. So questions that drive to an outcome, how long until the health mandates lifted? And we're seeing some of them lifted maybe prematurely. Obviously, we need to see some sort of antiviral or vaccine, and there's a lot of companies, there's 110 companies spending significant dollars trying to develop a medical solution, if you will. And we're seeing some vaccines that are being tested now. today working out and listening to MSNBC and Squawk Box and some other media. I heard very senior, serious people make estimates everywhere from 3 months to 18 months to no vaccine at all. So no one knows. I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen here. But we get testing and the ability to see if we have developed people that have been exposed and developed antibodies. We get that kind of testing in place, we'll be able to function much better. How deep is the current shock to the economy? No one really knows. We're seeing numbers, but these numbers don't really relate because they don't reflect how fast we can recover. Like the Volcker recession, a lot of people got hired back very, very quickly. Will that happen as fast this time? No, but it will happen faster than normal. So we don't really know how bad that shock is. We're going to have to see how fast we recover, what the speed of recovery is. What does government do? We talked about that. I think government needs one more stimulus program. How fragile, healthy was the economy in the past? We were, in all honesty, we probably had the best economic situation we'd had in a long time. I entered this year with unbridled optimism. It was the best economy I'd seen in my adult life. So things were solid. Again, that impacts how what the reaction is going to be, and I think we'll recover better than most people think. Will there be permanent or significant changes in consumer behavior? This is a very interesting question. I'll give you my 2 cents worth of my opinion on this. Short term, no large gatherings, no handshakes, a lot of people working from home, increased use of social media, and unfortunately, nursing homes and even to some extent retirement homes are being impacted. Long term, some increase in work from home. I don't think it's going to be as rampant as people think, but there'll be a noticeable increase. Prior to this pandemic recession, about 8% of our workforce worked from home. I can see that doubling. I can see that 15, 16%. What I do think will happen is you'll see more people working home on Friday or Monday or 1 or 2 days a week, but not permanently, because there is a dynamic of interacting with people that is invaluable and hard to replace. Retirement communities will be redesigned. The digitization of the mortgage process. I can remember investing a lot of money when MISMO started. That was 1999. MISMO was the Mortgage Information Standardization Management Act. And what that was all about was creating a standard data set for mortgage lending. And I thought that was going to drive some integrations and a massive digitization of the mortgage process. Didn't happen. But I think this pandemic is actually causing that to happen. Here at West, we are seeing a lot of outreach by lenders and other participants in the industry to try to figure out ways to quit rekeying data, to have data vaults, make the process more online, make it easier for buyers and sellers to access information. I think you're seeing it as realtors, and I think it will happen. I think we're going to see a real strong movement to more automation in the real estate process. Again, get yourself up to speed if you're not, and Wes would be happy to help you with that. And then refocus on the single family residence. So the Zillow economist had an interesting comment, and Skylar Olson, and the comment was this: work from home could mean more households choose larger homes further out. And what is happening there is that we are seeing people, we're seeing a move or a desire by people because of the pandemic to move from urban to suburban areas. People that are living with a family in an apartment want to have a house with a yard. Working from home will create a desire for home office. You are going to see some impact. I think the Inland Empire absolutely benefits from this. So form of the recovery, will it be a V? No. I'll be a U? I don't think so. W, L, these are all different. People talk about what kind of recovery we're going to have. Here's what kind of recovery we're going to have. It depends on how fast we get a medical solution. And the medical solution can even be a way to test, track, trace, and curtail the spread of the virus. It does not have to be a vaccine. You can see here we had a very sharp drop. We're going to see a very strong initial bounce back. And I do think we will see, and then we're going to see some good news with that, so that will help. The growth after that will depend largely on how quick we get a medical solution, good testing, antiviral or a vaccine, or if we don't, in which case getting back will take a long time. But we'll have a 90% economy by year end. And then I sincerely hope by the end of next year, we'll be back and talking about this all in past tense. So one thing that does concern me, you watch the change in active tests. We have not dropped as fast as areas that have had shelter in place and forced. And again, I hope we don't have an unnecessarily large second wave because of this. If it happens, it'll happen in places like the Southeast. The governors in the West, California, Oregon, and Washington, they've been marvelous. They've been, I think, done a really good job of curtailing this. So conclusion, the economy was in great shape. The American consumer was in very, very good shape. There's still a lot of uncertainty, but remember, this is a man-made recession. The key question is, how fast do we reemerge? Real estate will be one of the healthier sectors. I will tell you this, I mean this sincerely. I think we're all very fortunate to be working in this industry. We are seeing a very strong uptick in purchase money applications. The MBA just released their numbers. They said that purchase money applications have been up now each week for 5 weeks in a row. And last week, they were actually ahead, a little bit ahead of where they were last year, same week. Purchase money applications are actually up last week over a year ago last week. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this was informative. I'm happy to take some questions if there are questions.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Appreciate it. And as always, I love the way that you disseminate this information and make it positive. So thank you for doing that. Just a couple, we just have a few minutes left, but a couple of questions. One having to do with, we talked a little bit about the digitization of the mortgage process. So a couple of follow-ups there. Number one is, who is the barrier to this digital mortgage process? Is it the real estate? Is it the mortgage company? Is it the title company? And you've got these, these new acronyms popping up: RON, RIN, Avon. So how does that all kind of fit together, and what does it take to get us over the hump there?
It's regulatory.
Okay.
Everybody in the process, I'm really sorry about my allergies. Everybody in the process has different regulators. So mortgage is regulated different than real estate, from insurance, from appraisal, everybody is regulated differently. And then the business developed differently in all markets. So you have different business practices, you have different databases, you have different regulators. The effort by the trade associations is finally being jointly focused on changing the regulations, and that will facilitate getting digitization.
Yeah. So what can an agent that's listening today do? What can they do to help that process?
Well, I don't think they can help that process other than let NAR know they care about it. But I think what they can do is become capable by using technology to interface with their clients, to show their clients things online, to enable their clients to get information, to keep their clients current and abreast of what's happening. Get up to speed if you're not on how to use technology. You can do online listings, tours, and everything. We're seeing a lot of people buy homes now that have never actually been to the home, and I would never thought that would have happened, but technology is enabling that. So reach out to West, and West will be glad to help you on that.
Cool. And then just the last thing as we wrap up, we talked a lot about the economy and your projections for what it looks like. We often talk about our industry as, evolutionary versus revolutionary, right? And so we're seeing some of this evolution into a more technology focused agent. But what's your advice? I mean, who do you see as the winners and losers as it relates to the real estate industry after all of this?
Well, I tell you, the winners are going to be the agents that can rightfully and accurately position themselves as experts either in the market or access to the market. The value proposition that a real estate agent has is enabling the buyer and seller to execute the transaction quickly, effectively, and at the right price. And being able to project that because you are technologically enabled and because you are very conversant and up to speed and up to date on the underlying information will go a long way. I think we'll see the consumer be more discriminating about who they use, and they're going to be looking for an expert. They're going to be looking for a technologically enabled expert.
Okay. One more question, and she's asking, do you think foreclosures, REOs, and short sales will increase in the next few months?
Not in the next few months, but probably starting in Q3, August, September, as the forbearance starts running off. But I think the forbearance is being backstopped pretty strongly now. So I think really Q4, you will see that, you'll see noticeable increase in Q4. It will not get as bad. It won't be analogous to what you saw after the Great Recession. It won't be like that, but there will be an increase in Q4.
Okay. All right. I think we got through the questions. So a lot of folks out there are asking about recordings and slide decks. So Eric Eltholtz, he is our marketing and technology director for West there in the Inland Empire. He will be getting out the slide deck and recording to all attendees post call. So you'll be able to access that by tomorrow. So again, Pat, thank you so much. Love the information, and thank all of you for being here and taking an hour out of your day.